Good evening and welcome to an evening with the women of F1. It is great to have so many of you joining us from all over the country and the world. So thank you so much for spending your Monday evening with us. It's February. What better way to kick off February 2021 than to have a chat with some of the wonderfully talented women in Formula One. Now, a quick note, if you think, actually, do you know what? I'm going to let everyone do the hard work this evening and I'm going to come back and watch this later. You can, because we are recording. So you can close off your camera and go and have your dinner and catch up with what we get up to this evening a little later on. But we'll have a little bit more housekeeping a little bit later. But just that's the first note. So it is a very special event, an evening with the women of F1. And it's organised by Formula One and FIA Girls on Track UK, managed by Motorsport UK. So a very special event. And of course, there are going to be lots of these wonderful events over the course of February. So hopefully you've all managed to sign up for several of them or all of them if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about Formula One and the wonderful women that work in the sport. Now, who am I? I am Rosanna Tennant and I am a presenter for Formula One. So I'm very lucky to call a lot of the women that we will hear from over the course of February my colleagues. And the two women we'll be speaking with this evening I have worked particularly closely with over the last few weeks as well, and of course over the last few seasons. So why are we doing this wonderful series of events? Well, Formula One has a mission to improve its inclusivity and diversity. And so they thought, well, what better way to kick things off than to collaborate with FIA Girls on Track UK? Because of course, Girls on Track UK has an incredible history of inspiring and helping the next generation get into motorsport. So if that is you, then you are in the right place this evening. And of course, you'll be in the right place over the course of the next few weeks as well. Now back to my housekeeping. I'm a very strict Zoomer, so unfortunately we would love to have everybody chatting together this evening, but we're going to mute everybody and unfortunately you won't have the ability to unmute yourself, but hopefully that means you can hear what our wonderful guests this evening have to say. But it wouldn't be a Q&A without some questions, so we would love you to get involved using the chat function. Use the everyone button because we want to see all your questions, and I will do my best to put all your questions to our wonderful guests. And it seems like it's a bit of a secret. Who are we speaking to this evening? Well, you've registered for the event, so you probably know already, but we will be hearing from Africa Rosaleny, video editor at Formula One, and Natalie Gibson, also in the digital space as a digital video manager. But so much more than that. Those two, I know from my experience of working with them, do so much on the ground at the tracks and back at base in the UK. And we're going to hear so much about what they get up to throughout the course of this evening. Now, I think it's time to get to our Q&A. Let's come to Africa. Africa Rosaleny, good evening. So great to have you with us this evening.
Hi, Rosanna.
About what you do. How are you, first of all? We've been messaging a lot over the course of the last few weeks. We're doing some voiceovers, some features for F1 social media.
Exactly.
To finally see you.
I'm very happy to see you and not actually being asking you to voice something over and get it for me for tomorrow. So.
Now,
yeah.
A lot of people would think the winter break is quite a quiet time in Formula One, that sort of period from mid-December to mid-February before the cars are launched and tested. But you are busy. So what are you up to in the winter break and what are you up to normally during the course of a Formula One season?
Well, so yeah, as you say, it's a very busy period. And once the season gets over, we have to prepare a lot of content for people still want to see a lot of content about Formula One. And so, yeah, we prepare all sorts of top 10s and compilations and documentaries. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to. A lot of top 10 moments of brilliance of all sorts of our legendary drivers. And yeah, as you say, I've been a video editor. Now I'm more a producer at Formula One. And I own a few of content strands for our digital platforms, F1.com, sometimes F1 TV, and yeah, managing all sorts of video content for our audience.
It is a busy time for you, Africa, and it is so fabulous to catch up with you this evening. I know, obviously, this is after hours, so it's fabulous that you've given up your evening. So it's lovely to have you with us. And I've now got to introduce Natalie Gibson. Natalie, we haven't been in touch over the last few weeks. It feels like we haven't seen each other for a long time. So this is a long overdue catch up. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you? I only ever hear your voice when we're doing rehearsals. Never get to see you.
Absolutely, because I'm sure, well, hopefully a lot of people joining us this evening might be subscribed to F1 TV. You've been at the tracks over the course of the 2020 season, a bizarre season, so brilliant that Formula One got 17 races away, done and dusted. You were at some of them. What was your role when you were out at the tracks, but also what's your role when you're back in the UK?
So my role is kind of a 50-50 split between, as you said, kind of track and UK. When I'm at the track, I'm in charge of our video capture team. So what we'll be doing is anything that's more feature-led or social-led. So anything that's happening kind of outside of what you're seeing on the tracks. If we're doing kind of feature interviews with the drivers, trying to have a bit of fun, which is slightly trickier when you're in COVID restrictions and you can't get near anybody.
You can't even talk if they're smiling.
Yeah, you can't. Do a lot of this.
Yeah,
I've noticed
very good
now.
eyes. My eyes are smiling.
Yeah. And then when I'm back at base, it's a lot of kind of planning this content. So I do a lot of liaison with the F1 team, so kind of pitching ideas for content to them, and also just making sure that within F1 we're communicating internally all the fabulous things we're doing on digital and social.
God, again, another super busy role. And Natalie, I have to say, you're making me feel like I want to go on holiday even more than I thought I already did. Beautiful plants, flowery shirt. I look like I'm dressed for a funeral. You in Africa, bright and boozy on this dank, dark and miserable Monday evening. But we are here to brighten that up for everybody. So these are our two wonderful guests, Africa and Natalie. And as I mentioned at the beginning of, I'm going to call it a show, at the beginning of the show, I said, do get in touch using the chat function. You'll see there's a little invitation there. So please do send in your questions. No questions are silly this evening. If you want to know what it's like to be Natalie and Africa in the Formula One paddock, working in amongst it, then please do send a message. And just like that, look at that, we've already got a question. Here we go. Florencia has messaged saying, how do you feel about this year-long season? How do you manage the amount of content you've got to create? And I guess that's a question that applies to both of you. Africa, I'll come to you. It's almost an endless supply of content. I know you've got a bit of a nickname amongst your team. Going through the archive, tell us what your nickname is in Formula One.
Yeah, so I've been called lately the archive queen.
I think what a job to go through all of the archive footage that Formula One has for so many years of racing.
It's amazing.
How do you manage it? How do you manage what to put out?
So that's one of the most things that I'm grateful for in this job. Coming from a Formula One channel, coming from Movistar TV, it's a Formula One channel, but of course without the massive access that you have as Formula One to the massive history and footage and like all the cameras and onboards, it's Christmas every day. So yeah,
we've got that angle. Yes, we have. We've got it from 4 different angles.
Exactly. So that's how you can create all the angles, content strands, and you just like surf the archive and let's find everything we can from all the perspectives. So it's really enjoyable from that point of view, and I enjoy finding those little bits of jewels from the archive here and there, and you find amazing interviews, and it's lovely.
Now, you mentioned you'd worked at Movistar before. Some questions coming in, one particular from Yasmin, saying what kind of experience is best to have to get a role in content in Formula One? Because some people might be thinking, well, I don't know everything about it. How could I become the queen of the archive or archive queen? You know, maybe I don't know what happened in XYZ race in 1986 or that overtake around that particular bend. Can you come to Formula One as potentially not like an absolute expert? Is there help there?
Absolutely. We live in the internet era. I've always had a horrible memory. I do, after so many years, I already have average knowledge of Formula One, and I can recall a few facts. But for example, I come from a mega Formula One passionate family, and if you ask my brother, he has a memory of an elephant. He will remember who had the crash, what year, what engine, everything, and I don't have that. But it's you have to make the most of your skills, whatever they are. In my case, so it was like being that maybe that little side of a bit more knowledge about Formula One specifics, but also software skills, like if you want to be a video editor or a producer, or just be strong in whatever skills you have and find a way of finding the role where you will be able to exploit them.
Definitely. And what about you, Natalie? Do you feel that, because you've got a very varied background, and tell us how you sort of found your way into Formula One?
So mine's a slightly different path, because I was brought to F1 because they were looking for a content creator who wasn't already embedded within motorsport. So it's something that kind of my dad was really into. So I've got the memories of like Sunday lunch and hearing the noise of the cars in the background and that kind of thing. Yeah. But I was if Africa says she's got a limited knowledge of F1, then goodness knows what you would make of my knowledge of F1. But I think Africa's right in sort of playing to your skill set. Certainly when I've been at Formula One, nobody's ever kind of poo-pooed an idea because I got a date wrong or because I didn't, know something about a driver. I think if you find something interesting, then chances are there are other people, because everyone consumes F1 in different ways. So some people will be into the super nerdy kind of part of the sport and know every single detail, but then some people are just into kind of the personalities and like the lifestyle aspect of it. So I think we want to have a content team who can kind of reflect how people want to consume that content.
And I guess that's a tricky job, because you've got to cater for everybody, and of course that everybody is male, female, casual fan, as you say, the very technical fan who wants to know all about the details of the power units and how the cars are built. So actually that's a huge operation to try and manage, and as you mentioned at the beginning, that's kind of what you've been brought in to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a balancing act really, because the hardcore tech content's probably not going to be hardcore and tech enough for some people, and vice versa. So what we're really trying to do, particularly this year, is how do we kind of broaden out that voice so that there isn't that kind of barrier to entry? Because I think one of the things is, if you are a really hardcore F1 fan, you can probably find the information you want yourself. But if you're kind of fairly new to the sport, how do you deepen your understanding? It's kind of very difficult. I probably found this myself at first, when you're like, well, I know who's won the race and I kind of understand that because I can read that, but what was the strategy behind how they did win that race? So we're trying to find ways to kind of peel that back, probably similar to what you do in our post-race show, Rosanna, is kind of look at analysing that in a really simple way so people can kind of understand, like, oh, I see what happened there. That pit stop at that time was the right moment for that driver to eventually get on the podium or whatever.
Yes, and actually it's almost harder to make something simple to understand, because you're having to pare it back and peel away those sort of layers of the onion. But Natalie, I'm so interested, because it sort of feels like you ended up, so to speak, in Formula One, but not having really set out to do that. And it's a little bit like me as well. When was the moment that you sort of thought that actually you wanted to get into content creation? So maybe not necessarily the F1 part, but content creation.
And so probably for me, a lot of that was when I was at university. We had a student TV channel, which I really enjoyed doing. I was doing news. I think for a while I thought I wanted to be a news reporter, but I actually wasn't very good. Whereas I thought a lot of my skills were more behind the camera, a lot of organizing, kind of looking for, kind of having an eye for what would make a story. And I think it kind of evolved from there. So I did some work in news, and I ended up falling into more the sort of features, kind of human interesty, lighter side of that, which then kind of led me into having skills that would work for F1, will hopefully work for F1.
So actually having experiences at university or potentially even college, because I'm sure some people have got wonderful facilities or activities they can get involved in, you'd really recommend that can really help, can it, when you're sort of submitting your CV to Formula One?
Yeah, or I think now, tech's moved on so much. If you have got the opportunity, shoot something yourself We're constantly scouring YouTube, etc., looking for new content creators, someone who's bringing a new angle to the sport. I probably went to university what feels like the Stone Age now, where we had one internet computer in our newsroom. Yeah.
Oh dear. No, definitely, and I think I probably speak from my own experience as well. If there's any sort of club or society or anything at your university or school, or even if you've just heard about it locally, get involved with it, because I think that does it doesn't sort of set you apart necessarily, but it makes people realise that you're really passionate about doing it and you're taking it seriously. So I definitely would recommend that. Africa, coming back to you then. So you mentioned that your brother has a lot of interest in Formula One, but when did you decide you'd like to get into this side of the sort of industry, the content side and news?
So for me, I think it has been exactly the opposite as Natalie. Like for me, the difficult thing is getting away from it. Like since I was a kid, yes, I'm trapped by Formula One.
Not a bad place to be, Africa.
No, exactly. I'm very happy to be trapped by Formula One. It's a long story. Yeah, my family, especially my brother, my father, they are passionate Formula One fans and a bit of pioneers. Back in 1997 in Spain, internet was basically nothing. We were very far away from the internet bubble that was already happening in the US, but they were very passionate about it, and they thought, we would like to find a place to share this passion with other fans, and what better place than the internet? So my father decided to. He was like he worked at a factory at the time, but he liked computers, he liked Formula One. He was like, okay, let's make a Formula One website. So that was my entry into Formula One. And since I was a kid, I helped. I wrote articles. I translated press conferences. Since I think it was I was 19 when I went for the first time to the launch of the Spanish Grand Prix, and I was there at the press conference. I did ask some questions. So I've always been involved in it. And from there I jumped. I had a small gap when after university that I worked in other sports. I worked for NBC, and I actually got to do Olympic Games, a lot of Premier League, and I decided I prefer Formula One much better. So yeah, after that I went to Movistar Formula One, and then I was like, okay, I will move to the UK. Maybe I can get to do something different, something that's not sport or Formula One. Here we are.
But I mean, Africa, you make that sound very easy. Like it's just been a hop, skip and a jump from the earlier years in your career. And you're mentioning some huge broadcaster names there. And I'm feeling quite intimidated by it. And I'm sure a lot of people watching are thinking, my goodness, break it down for us. How do those opportunities come about? Is it just emailing? Is it just picking up the phone? How could some of the people who are joining us this evening potentially get into the industry?
So I've realized that you need to be very stubborn, and you need to take every opportunity. You never know what, it's very stupid to say, you never know like what the door is going to close and a window is going to open, but it's absolutely true. And what I've discovered is that in my case, the family business, to put it that way, has opened or has made visible a lot of doors, but then it's your job to pursue them. And for example, I was in the US and I didn't know anyone, and my goal, I have to explain. My last year of university, I got on a scholarship, and I studied my last year of university in the United States, and I was very fixated in staying, and I wanted to stay there and work there, and it was very difficult to achieve because you cannot get a visa. But
yes, technicalities.
Yeah, but through all the effort that I did to stay and all the contacts that I tried to make, I got the opportunity to work in NBC as a freelancer from Spain, and that led to other things. And then I got the opportunity to do an interview with Movistar, and then you get those entries by being open to opportunities, but then you have to step up for it and be brave and actually go for it and do your best.
I often say that, you know, someone might be able to help you get a foot in the door, but it's your job to get the other foot inside. It would be a shame to leave the other one outdoors.
Yeah.
Natalie, what about you? Because there are a lot of opportunities, but there are a lot of people who want to work. You know, they hear the words F1, they hear the word motorsport, and it all sounds like a wonderful place to work, which it is, but the competition is very, very hard. How did you manage to carve out a way for yourself?
I think from my side, there's part of it that's sort of looking at what transferable skills you've got. And if you're someone who's looking to start in the industry, then maybe you look at where the path could take you. So is this first job my dream job? Probably not, but will I learn things that will help me kind of go up the ladder? I think sometimes there is a benefit to working for smaller companies because you actually get to do a lot more. Like there's certainly places where I'm one of a team of 4, I'm doing way more than I would be doing if I'm in kind of a massive corporation, which is where you can get a lot more experience. And I think one of the other things that I probably wasn't very good at in kind of the first few years of my career is not applying for things because I didn't fit every single point in the criteria, which I know a lot of people, particularly women, unfortunately, will fall foul of. But it's kind of look at what you think you can do, and maybe the things at the bottom of the job description aren't actually the things that people were really interested in anyway. Because sometimes if I'm writing one, you'd be like, well, it would also be great if they could speak French, but that's probably not a prerequisite for the job. Yeah. So it's kind of looking at your skills and trying to look at yourself objectively as well. Like if I was hiring me, what would I think I was good at?
Definitely. I know exactly what you're talking about there. You see a job description, you think, oh, I'm not quite ready for that. But actually, 9 times out of 10, and probably 10 out of 10, you are ready for it. You just have to take that leap of faith and think, do you know what? I'm just going to work really, really hard and try my absolute best. And I'm sure I'll be able to pull that off. So yes, if people in the chat are thinking, gosh, well, there are some things that I'd like to apply for, just go for it, because you never know what it might lead to. And it may be a no, but it might put you into the maybe pile for the next job. So it's just always worth putting yourself forward. A great question has come in from Izzy. What's one thing you wish you'd known when you were starting out? And Natalie, I come to you on this, because it sort of follows up from that early stages of your career. What do you wish you'd known?
So probably just knowing that things will turn out okay. I think there's probably times, particularly I did a lot of freelance work, and you can just find that being very kind of stressful and consuming time of like, oh my God, I haven't worked for 2 weeks. Like, this is like the worst thing in the world. But kind of like what you and Africa have touched on, you know, it's kind of building up that network and understanding the importance of that, and not being afraid to sort of message people you've worked with before to say, you know, are there any shifts going here, or can I do that? Because actually that's what people want. They want recommendations, people they can rely on. You know, if you or Africa recommended someone to me, chances are I would want to work with them, certainly want to see them. And so I think there's sort of a bit of that. Probably tell myself to have a bit more confidence in myself and my ability than I did back then, because I think I'm one of those people that it takes me a long time to bed in with people before I'll actually kind of come out of my shell. And I think when you're just starting out, that can come across as kind of too much shyness, and you might have someone else in the room who's like a real kind of extrovert, and that can kind of hold you back slightly. So it is kind of having a bit of more confidence in your own ability.
And also you're worried, aren't you, that you might say something that puts someone off hiring you again. So you sort of err on the side of caution that you don't annoy someone or irritate somebody. So it's a really difficult balance to strike. But as you say, the confidence to even send an email, I think, can shine through that, you know, you've taken the time to sit down at your laptop, put together an email and send it through. And I think that speaks volumes as well. Just again, going back to that sort of, you know, being stubborn, as Africa said, that perseverance and tenacity. I think it's important in all industries, but in Formula One, because of the competitive nature, I think even more so. And Africa, what about you? What do you wish you'd known? Are you kind of also along the lines of Natalie, of sort of knowing that actually everything is going to work out okay? Don't panic.
Yeah, that's a massive one. I think especially when I've noticed that when I change jobs, when, for example, when I've done the jump from video editing to producing, I've had those 2 weeks in which you are panicking. You're like, this is not gonna work, and I have so many things to do, and I don't know, and I'm not gonna remember, and I'm gonna miss something. But yes, there's you will get across that. You will be okay. And another important one is I I've always been too young for the job that I've had, and I've always made me think
I'm
that.
going to ask you, do you think that's you thinking you're too young, or has that been attitudes that you've felt other people perhaps look at you and think, why, she's very young to be doing this job?
Yeah, well, especially I think when I was working on NBC, for example, I was, for example, during the Olympic Games, I was coordinating the team of the digital team on the website and the freelancers, and I was coordinating people that were like 40 years old or 50 years old or 30. I look youngish, and I was 20, 21 or 20, 20, 21, 22. So and when I was in Movistar, I was video editor, I was doing reporting, I was a live translator, and I was 22 too, and I was the youngest on the team. And you always feel like just because you're the youngest and the most inexperienced, your opinion or your point of view is less valid. So I wish I had been more like confident on my skills and my point of views, and not be like thrown back by the fact of being the youngest there.
It sort of goes against the natural hierarchy, doesn't it? We sort of have this odd concept of how the working world works. You know, the youngest are usually the most junior, and as you get older, you get more senior. But you're right. I think with this digital explosion, obviously the younger generation is a bit more adept to dealing with those skills. So yes, it's a weird environment we're all having to operate in at the moment. Thank you so much. I've just got to say a word. The questions are coming in thick and fast. So thank you so much to all of you for joining. Such great questions. We're going to do our best to get through them all. This is an interesting one. What is your on-track routine, and what's your key to staying original and creative with the content you produce? And that's from Joanna. Natalie, I'll ask you that. How do you stay original and creative? The sport's been going on for a long time, and although actually Formula One now, the digital side is obviously in its infancy, it's almost like a startup. You could almost say everything's been done. How do you come in every Monday morning and go, I've got a new idea, I've got a new idea?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's one of those where, sort of, for example, Lewis's success is a double-edged sword, because on one hand, we're living and witnessing one of the greatest sporting achievements ever, but on the other hand, you can look at it and say, oh, it's the same story as last year, isn't it? And I think part of our job is to look at how we kind of pitch that. I think one of the good things about the sport is that there are different drivers. So we have got sort of 20 heroes every year. We have got kind of some new rookies coming in. I think what's really lovely at the moment is that actually a group of our drivers have a really nice rapport, so that enables us to do things kind of inter-team, which we probably wouldn't have done before. But I think a lot of it is just working through the challenges. So something being perceived as kind of samey or boring, it's kind of us in our ideas meeting looking at that and going, okay, well, how can we make that interesting? Or are there people who may not have seen that before, and do we aim it towards them? So do we aim something towards sort of a younger demographic if we feel like they haven't done that before? But yeah, I'd agree, it's something that we certainly struggle with, but work through.
I love that, though, that you have an ideas meeting, because I know when I was at school and uni, I sort of thought, well, how does everyone operate in the working world? What goes on? How do these meetings happen? They sound scary. So an ideas meeting sounds fabulous. How often do you have them? What's the kind of, obviously it's difficult now, I imagine, face to face, but how do you get together? Does everyone have to come in with a sheet of paper and a few ideas, or how do you run it?
So what I try to do, which I think is quite helpful, is try and structure it around a few pillars. And obviously there's always room for like a random idea, but for example, the meeting we had last month was looking towards winter testing. So we'll have time with the drivers at testing. We also know we've got kind of 3 days of track coverage, and then we'll be looking at, okay, what can we do with that? Is there anything new we can do with kind of the footage on track, the commentary angles, etc.? Then looking at if we can get some time with the drivers away from the track, what would we do with that? Africa works very closely with Jolyon Palmer, so we're bringing him to track for testing. So we were working through some concepts with him. But what I find, I don't know if you are the same, is that actually out of those meetings, when you've got a few people kind of bouncing ideas, obviously that's when you're good ideas come. So I think even if I've walked in with just one concept or one that I think is a bit ropey, actually the one will develop will actually be something really nice because you've got people who are in that mindset and you've dedicated an hour, whatever, to focusing on that.
I think that's the key thing, isn't it? I think, again, I go back to this. I obviously felt like the most terrified person leaving school and university. I just felt like this huge world was out there and I wasn't quite sure how to navigate it. But what I love, as you mentioned there, it's not just you having to come up with all the ideas. There are so many different people in the team, different roles, different responsibilities. And that ideas meeting, who's invited, like juniors, seniors, a mixture, everyone kind of mixing together at F1?
Yes, so a mix. So particularly ahead of a race, so probably 2 weeks before a race, we'll have all of our digital team. So that's everyone from kind of the most junior to kind of the head of content. And then we'll also have different members of the F1 department. So we'll have someone from our marketing team, someone from the promotions team, someone who's doing kind of the specific live track capture so that we can all pull together and, oh, I've heard this, do you think we should be doing that, etc. So it's a really nice mix. And I think you'd much prefer it that way and have it happening in an organic way, because I've had issues before where I'd work in newsrooms and it would be like the ideas meeting and like you dare not come with an idea, and so you just have loads of really terrified people pitching things that they don't really believe in, but they're just so scared to turn up empty-handed. I think
you slightly touched on the sort of workflow of the race weekends and how you approach it with the ideas. And that's kind of going back to a question we've had from Cynthia talking about that and how you sort of structure that over the course of the weekend. Africa, what about you? How do you structure it? Because when there's so much content to get through, how do you prioritize what's going on? Natalie alluded to, we've got Lewis Hamilton, always going to be a news story. How do you make sure that you're catering to everybody, but also featuring enough of the drivers and enough of the world of Formula One?
Well, it's first, it's you need to understand what's news, what's priority news-wise, what's going to be more. If you are heading into the German Grand Prix, for example, and the build-up content to it, it's going to be a priority. If there is news that something happens, there's a breaking news of Vettel has signed with Aston Martin, then that's gonna jump the queue, and then you're gonna be okay. This is news. People are interested in it. So what kind of content can we offer about it? So let's sum up Vettel's top 5 moments with Ferrari. Let's have a look at Aston Martin. Does it have any history with Formula One? What about the brand? So you are always prioritizing what's trending, kind of thing, and then set up your deadlines, and then you have that's your prioritization, like what needs to be published tomorrow. That's what you're looking at.
So it's interesting because when people perhaps saw that you, Africa, and Natalie were speaking this evening, they might have thought, oh, wow, very creative role, lots of exciting ideas being thrown around. And we've spoken about the ideas meeting, which I'd love to come to. It's actually quite an organizational role that you both have, trying to sort of manage your time, manage teams. So perhaps people who are watching and listening this evening, perhaps they're really creative, but actually you do need to have a sort of more office mentality as well to make sure that the team is operating efficiently, especially as you're all over the world.
For me, that's been the biggest change from video editor to producer. As a video editor, it was very satisfying to just be like, okay, you need to edit this top 10 or this Alonso's letter to my younger self. Okay, this is my project. I sit down, I edit it, and I export, it's done. And now it's like, okay, I have these 10 moments of brilliance edits, and I have to prepare for Palmer's content on testing, and so then it's okay, let's set the deadlines, let's organize what resources do I need. Do I need to email Rosanna with the voiceovers that I need? Do I need to get someone started looking for footage on the archive? So yes, you need to set up all the tasks and just what's gonna take me from the idea to the video exported at the end of the queue. And yeah, I've really had to step up on my organizational skills, which I don't think they are far off from the best, but yeah, you need to get that organized mindset.
Definitely. Well, I alluded to the fact that obviously Formula One takes us around the world. I'd love to ask you both how you find that. And Eleanor's message in saying, do you enjoy the traveling aspect of your job? Because the outsiders might think it's just all fun and holidays and glamour. But as we've already mentioned, there is a serious job to do for both of you. How do you find that, the sort of aspect of managing work life? Natalie, I'll come to you.
I'd probably say one of the most surprising things is that you can go to a new country, a new city, and actually never see any of it. Obviously, last season we were operating under very strict protocols, so that's sort of understandable. It was track and hotel and then fly home. But seasons before that, you know, that it's quite an intense weekend, especially if you're working in sort of different time zones, because for example, if we're in the US, Mexico, Brazil, etc., we'll be kind of operating across 2 time zones, because we'll have kind of a team in the UK that are doing their office hours that we've got to do, and then we're also on track. But I think it's definitely one of the kind of treats is to be able to go to different countries and just to get that close to the cars and to the action is certainly kind of worth the not seeing the kind of normal tourist sites for a few days.
And of course, the internet never sleeps. So when we go to a race like Singapore, obviously the Formula One teams can be really strict. They shift and they work on the European time. But actually, when it comes to content and video editing, you've just got to be like 24/7 available and always on it. And you don't want to miss those trends that Africa talked about. You've got to jump on it, be reactive. So I guess you're managing teams on the ground at the racetracks, but when they've got to sleep, you've then got to be in touch with your UK team that are kind of backing up and taking over it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things is if you're at the track, people want the news to come from the track. So even if it's something that hasn't happened there, if it's an F1 story, we then need to kind of spring to life and make sure that we react to that and create content from where we are, because that's kind of where most people will be. So if we want any sort of comment analysis, we're in the right place. But yeah, it could be 2 o'clock in the morning.
So we've put stubborn on the list. I'm putting stamina on the list as well for the qualities on your job, like descriptions that you're sending out, Natalie, in Africa, I can imagine. My goodness, yes, they're long race weekends. I think don't make any bones about it. So it's obviously, this is an FIA Girls on Track event with F1. We're all women on this call at the moment. Well, the one speaking. We've got a lot of questions in talking about that side of life in Formula One. Rosanna Turk, not me, I'm Rosanna Tennant, but Rosanna Turk has messaged, what specifically about being a woman in F1 do you enjoy? Let's start with the positives. So Africa, being a woman in Formula One, why is it so great?
I don't know if it's specific about being a woman or specific about the culture of the company, is that I've always felt heard. Like I've never, as Natalie was saying before, there's never been an idea that has been dismissed. Every door of every office has been open for me to just go and be like, oh, we need to make this video about whatever driver that died in '63, you know, and I really appreciate that. And I've never been underestimated, and that's something that's very easy that I might have felt in other places, that maybe they assume that you don't know, or that you are too young to know, or things like that. And the culture in this company is the greatest thing that I get to experience every day, and just very supportive, and just working with people like Natalie, it's just it's encouraging. It's you learn, and you feel that you can add, and that you can be heard.
Absolutely. No, fantastic. So you don't feel that there's any barrier to entry being a woman in the sport. And Natalie, what about you? Because you've had experience in so many other newsrooms and different industries and sort of areas of broadcasting. How do you find walking into the F1 paddock?
I was quite pleasantly surprised, actually, because I think I had myself braced for, it's a sport full of men, but it's not necessarily, an office full of men. So we can't say, that we're a 50-50 balance at this point. I think that's something we still need to work on. But as Africa said, I certainly didn't feel threatened or intimidated or sort of overshadowed by being a woman. And I think there's a lot of value in what we do, that we don't have to put ideas forward just that are based on kind of women and the way women consume content. Like, we are treated as just an F1 fan. But I can understand why people would have those kind of reservations, because it was certainly something that was sort of playing on my mind. Because as you mentioned, I have been in sort of more masculine kind of workspaces, offices, where you did feel sort of a second-class citizen as a woman, but it's certainly hasn't been the case here, which is great.
Good. And we've had another question in a similar theme from Nyenke, asking what it's like being a woman in a man's world. But are you actually noticing the change of more women joining F1? They've asked as well. You kind of alluded to that obviously 50-50 is not there yet, but I feel, I've worked in the sport since 2013, and I definitely feel that there has been a shift. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think not just in terms of who we're hiring, but certainly when we are going through that process and we're seeing CVs, you're certainly getting more of a balance, which is great. And I think that's something that we're working particularly hard on. Even things like, how do we write that job description? How do we make sure that isn't putting people off applying? Can we make the hours kind of flexible in certain roles? Obviously now working from home is a little bit more acceptable than it was before, because we've all seemed to have got used to it quite quickly.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think for sure, I think Africa was the first woman in the digital content team, I think, when it was kind of a smaller, and now we've grown.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of getting to almost kind of a parity now, which is really nice.
Do you feel it has then changed Africa? As Natalie mentioned, you were the first, and then obviously there are more. And what does that make you feel as a woman when you arrive at work?
To be fair, I don't experience it in a different way, just because maybe because I haven't been treated differently. I also don't feel, I mean, it is great, of course, to see women, but because I've been lucky enough to work in a team where everyone is equal, where I've been able to be the one suggesting, the technical ideas. One of the videos that I made that was more successful was a video about F1's technical innovations, and I didn't think I didn't think about me as a woman giving that idea. No one thought about me as a woman when I gave that idea. So everyone is just people being colleagues and doing their jobs, and yet you don't have that gender barrier or approach to your daily life. It's just we are all in this together kind of thing.
It's interesting you say that. I was talking, and I'm going to say it, on Driven by Diversity. I was talking on the podcast with Steph and Ariana, which I think they're watching because I can see some questions coming in from them. I was talking with them the other day that I don't think a lot of us, and I would say the majority of the females in the paddock, we don't walk around thinking, I'm a woman. It is more, when I walk in there and I'm Rosanna, I work in motorsport and I happen to be a woman. It's not, I'm a woman, I work in motorsport, I'm Rosanna. It's sort of, you almost have to park that because you've got a job to do. And as you say, you've just got to get busy doing the content, making the content. So yes, it's reassuring to know that even if there were any sort of attitudes that people were thinking, why is a woman coming up with the technical ideas? There isn't any of that. But I think also it's super useful and important to slightly park all of that when you come into work and just think, well, everyone's here. They've been chosen because they're great at what they do. Let's get on and make the best of it and put the best content out there. So it's really interesting that you feel like that too, that you almost forget the gender element and you're just there to do a great job. So great questions as well from people. So thank you so much. Interestingly, obviously we've spoken about how you guys started very young in the industry. I'm feeling a little bit hurt now that someone's asking about mid-20s, but we've had a great question in from Jade saying, would you ever say it's too late for a career change to get into F1? I'm in my mid-20s. Well, wait till you get to your early 30s. And she has a degree in business management and Spanish, but it seems hard to find opportunities as most of them cater for people who already have experience in the industry or are still looking for a student looking for internships and studying a relevant degree. Do you have advice for people in her position? So perhaps somebody who's already started down one career path but wants to move across. Is there a barrier to entry? Can you ever be too old to join the sort of fun-loving, creative digital team?
No, I'd say two things.
I'm in.
One is there's so many different skills that that in Formula One that are not necessarily F1 related. The company is full of people that maybe when they come into Formula One, they barely know the drivers. But there's so many aspects to Formula One: marketing, sponsorship, even legal, all sorts of departments in which you can bring skills to that. From your, maybe you've done a degree in business management or whatever, and then you can bring those skills into Formula One in so many departments. And for the age thing, I don't know, like I think about my father. He was a factory worker, and he was in his 40s when he started his business as in Formula One with his website. And yeah, he was in his 40s, and it was a massive career change. So it is never too late. If you have a goal, you just need to figure out what steps you need to take to get whatever you want to get.
Definitely, and take it from me, if you're in your mid-20s, please, Jade, give it a shot, because you have got plenty of time. Do not worry. I only started presenting Pole Position back in the day. I think I was 25, so mid-20s, you're young. Natalie, what about you? I mean, age is not a barrier to entry. We've ticked off the fact that gender shouldn't be. Age, I'm sure, shouldn't be either. Anyone can join your team, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it wouldn't be something that we would even kind of look at if we were hiring. You don't have that idea of, they need to be this age to, communicate to this demographic, whatever. And kind of like Africa said, there are different parts of F1 that kind of suit different age demographics, different experience, etc. So I think if you can find something you're good at and something that you love, then I guess the goal is to try and put those two things together. And that's not going to come overnight. That might be something that happens kind of 10, 20 years into your career.
Definitely, yeah, never too late. And don't live with regret. Give it a shot. What is the worst that can happen? You'll probably get the job anyway. So Natalina has asked a question saying, what type of experience do you recommend to gain for a graduate who wants to work in a creative role in F1 in the future? And I know we're living through tricky times at the moment, because people who will have graduated in the summer of 2020, very different landscape to perhaps what there would have been if we weren't blessed with this wondrous virus. What can people be doing to sort of set themselves apart and try and stand out to you when you're going through those endless piles of CVs, Natalie?
So I think it's the extracurricular things that you can do. So kind of, I think we've touched on it to kind of give you that edge. If you're dedicating a portion of your free time to doing something, it's clear that that's something that you're really passionate about. So is it kind of, creating your own content, kind of writing stories about F1, kind of shooting some content on your phone and uploading it, or kind of trying to get involved in communities like this so that you're just kind of getting a bit closer? Because I can probably appreciate that it can look a bit like a closed shop, which I don't think it is. I think it's just a case of us showing that we're not, which events like this hopefully will do. And I think it's anything that you can do to kind of get yourself noticed. I was like always entering like writing competitions, like journalism competitions, etc. when I was in my last year at university, because it's just a way to get yourself out there.
I'm going to announce, because what did you win, Natalie? What did you win?
I was the Young Journalist of the Year a few decades ago, it feels like now.
Stop it. Don't let the joke overshadow the achievement. You did brilliantly. Just say what you were again so everyone knows.
I was a Young Journalist of the Year.
There we go, exactly. Yeah. So phenomenal. But I think that all comes down to this hard work and just in your holidays, I know it sounds like, well, I want to enjoy my holiday, I want to go on a holiday, I want to have some time off, but actually, if you're really passionate about it, it should be a joy anyway, not a chore, to be calling up a local radio station, or, as you say, writing lovely articles and sending them in to people. That if that is your passion, then it should actually be a pleasure. So it's trying to find all those little spare moments that you have to try and further your opportunities and further that potential career, I think. So great advice there. And Africa, I have to ask, because people have been asking about working for F1, obviously coming from overseas. You mentioned, obviously, you're not English, you are Spanish. How important do you think having maybe an extra language, if some people on this wonderful call are considering choosing subjects and perhaps they are English speaking, but thinking, should I take a language on? Would that be useful in F1? How useful has it been being, I'm going to say bilingual, but you're probably going to say you're sort of quadrilingual or something. How many languages do you speak?
I'm trilingual.
There we
go. That's a great question, and it's a massive one for me. Of course, it for me at the when I was in Spain, just going to a different country when the main tool in my job was language. So I was in Movistar and I was writing my scripts and I was voicing my scripts, and just like going and being a presenter. And suddenly I was like, okay, I'm going to move to the UK. And suddenly all those options are gonna go away. So what do I do? And you suddenly can feel very trapped. But you think about what your skills are. In my case, it was, okay, I'm a video editor, I can edit. So that doesn't require any language. So let's start there. So I started applying for every video editing job that I could find. And from there, and actually it was knowing Spanish what got my first opportunity with Formula One, because I started editing the Spanish highlights for F1. And I started as a freelancer, and I would come in the weekends and edit. I'd take the Spanish commentary and make the Spanish highlights for it. So it was actually a pro to have that second language. And then through the years and through the experience, I've actually been able to go back to writing scripts and and building in like going back to doing the sort of tasks that I enjoyed more when I was in Spain and that I thought I would lose in a different country. So just find whatever skill that you think can be applied in a different country and try to remove the barriers and exploit what you have.
I think that's an amazing anecdote there, because again, it goes back to, having to be confident. And it is a bit scary because you're going out of your comfort zone, but sending that email, just trying to find video editor work. But of course, I should have known, but you sort of forget that there are Spanish highlights, there'll be French highlights, there'll be German highlights. So one email can then lead to so many other opportunities, and you might think, oh, it might come to nothing. But because Formula One is such a wonderfully global sport, there are so many opportunities. So for anyone who's joining us from around the world, not necessarily in the UK, and you have wonderful language skills, definitely get in touch with F1, because as Natalie mentioned, we've got 20 heroes and not all of them are English speaking. So we need lots of wonderful linguists. So do consider Formula One, because it is so brilliant, and you may get to travel as well. I want to ask, I saw a question, now it's just whipped up. I'm trying to find, here we go. Megan has messaged in. Thank you so much, Megan. What's your favourite memory from working in F1, and what was your favourite project or content that you've created? Natalie, how many years have you now been in? It all seems to blur into one lump. How many years have you been in F1?
Not very long. This is like my third season, third full season. Yeah.
But I can imagine, because you work in such a wonderful team and obviously in such a wonderful sport, there have been some amazing experiences. What's one that stands out for you?
I think from my side, it was probably more of just personally, just that moment when you feel like you're kind of on top of this, and the kind of not knowing much about F1 isn't a barrier anymore. My kind of confidence and my skills are coming through, that when we're at track, I am making the decisions and I'm not having them questioned. I'm not questioning myself. And then you can tell that was coming out through the content, and then realizing when you look back, being like, oh, those things I was doing, I was making all the right noises, moving things in the right direction. But it just takes a bit of perspective, because you're kind of quite scared and nervous when you first come in, especially when the first time you go to the track. Yeah.
Any job at all. So yeah, it's just finding your feet, isn't it? So, and that can be a huge personal achievement in itself.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, there are kind of like funnier times, like if you're trying to do kind of an interview with Kimi Räikkönen, for example, who can be a difficult character. If you get a good answer out of him, that's always a like personal highlight for the weekend. Or if you get more than 30 seconds, that's also a personal highlight.
Little like, whoop, whoop. Oh, I feel your pain, Natalie. Those drivers' parades with Kimi Räikkönen. I have to say, I look forward to them though, because in the sense that you get such achievement out of it, it's such a challenge that you want to rise to the occasion. You want to squeeze those words out of the likes of Kimi. So I totally get you. And it's so nice to feel that, you know, coming into your third season, that you are feeling like you are up and running and nothing's going to stop you, because yeah, watch out, Natalie Gibson knows her stuff. So and then Africa, what about you? Has there been a moment that you've sort of thought, whoa, I'm here in F1, even though you perhaps thought you weren't going to finish up in F1?
I think for me it's when I get some good feedback from a driver. So, you know, when I see that some content that I've produced then about Hamilton, then he shares it on his social media, and then you're like, okay, he has actually watched it and he liked it, you know. Or when I did Damon Hill's letter to my younger self, that he actually messaged back and said how, you know, how touched he was about it and how much he liked it. I think that's one of the things that makes you realize that maybe the content you are doing has some impact, or you see a comment on YouTube of a fan that has watched it and maybe has brought him to tears or has excited him in some way. So that's when you get that sort of appreciation, it's very fulfilling.
Definitely super rewarding, especially as I think we all know, you know, behind the scenes, you know how long it takes to plan all that content, get it filmed, put it through the edit, get it back to the people to sign it off sometimes as well. So it's a huge journey. And so, as you say, when you get a Formula One world champion like Damon Hill, you know, having such great feedback, that's an amazing moment, and perhaps one that you don't necessarily get in other industries, because Formula One is such a family and everyone is so in touch. I think that's a really, really special story. So yeah, wow, Africa, that's awesome. Well, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are recording all of this. So Natalie and Africa's wonderful answers, we will be able to rewatch and relive, which is great news, because it feels like this last hour has passed by in a shot. And also, we would love everybody, if you can spare 5 minutes of this rather lengthy lockdown here in the UK, to fill in a survey about this evening. That would be wonderful. Hopefully it won't take you too long, but hopefully your feedback will mean that the next events in the coming weeks, the evening with Women in Formula One, will be even bigger and better, if that is even possible. We've started off with Natalie in Africa, so we've set the bar quite high, but hopefully you've gained a bit of an insight into what it is like to be a digital video manager and a video editor at Formula One through Natalie in Africa's amazing answers. And don't forget to sign up to the FIA Girls on Track UK community page on Facebook. The video will go there. And there's a brilliant way of just interacting with the community there. So lots of questions and answers. You can get in touch with people in the community. And I'm sure we've had so many, and you'll see the links now in the chat function. They've been put there, so you can sign up and be part of these wonderful communities with Motorsport UK, FIA Girls on Track UK, and of course Formula One. And we'd love you to like and follow, subscribe to all of the social media outlets across those 3 big communities as well. Thank you so much for all of you getting in touch. And Africa and Natalie, thank you so much, because as we touched on at the very beginning, the winter break is not really a break, as it were. So it has been brilliant. And we've got, you know, lots of people saying thank you so much. And we didn't even get on to the fact that, Natalie, you hate bananas. We didn't cover the big hot topics. And Africa, we didn't talk about you and Toto Wolff, Toto and Africa and Rosanna. I mean, what references there? That might be for the older generation watching.
Yes.
But, It has flown by, and lots of people saying thank you so much. So got wonderful comments coming in, people saying really informative, thank you so much for your insights. Some muchas gracias as well to you, Africa, lots of people there. Exactly. It has been so great seeing you as well. I think so special in the times of Corona to actually see people's faces and to also know the characters behind all this wonderful content that is being put out on Formula One's YouTube channels and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and the list goes on. So thank you so much. And I think that will now bring us to the end of our very first evening with ... the women of F1. Tonight, your women were Natalie Gibson and Africa Rosaleny, and I have been Rosanna Tennant. Keep an eye on all the channels. As I said, the recording will go out, and there are so many more incredible evenings coming up over the course of the next few weeks, so please do register for them. Tell all your friends as well. Africa, adios, gracias. Natalie, thank you so much, and goodbye. And to all of you for watching, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.